Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining me this evening tonight on Saturday Night Talking Stick, all the way from the UK. My name is Silver and Sidiel, and I want to thank those who are joining me from YouTube, those who are joining me on Facebook, those who are joining me on Instagram, and those who are joining me on, obviously, TikTok. As a matter of fact, let me just feel free to share what's just share a couple of the videos as well. Feel free to share it on Instagram, share it on TikTok. But I want to say definitely on Instagram. You can see it on Instagram, but on Instagram it won't be saved. On Instagram won't be saved. You can't watch it on Instagram, so you got to watch it really on the on the main YouTube channel or Facebook. Well, this is Saturday night, and the key thing on Saturday night, I always like this is talking sick. So I like to ask persons like, what are you drinking? What are you drinking today? And I always say that very cautiously because with TikTok with all this sort of flagging say restrictions to say that give you restrictions. So I'm having not anything really with any, just mix up with some ginger beer and some strawberry, some lime, and some coconut water. So I hope that my guests will have something as well. So this is what I'm having today. Talking sick Saturday night, and if it gets too much, I'll have some water as much as possible. Well, tonight, as you can see, the topic is about UIC and Jamaica elections and spotlight on gender violence. Of recent days, we have had the issues in Jamaica regarding gender violence, regarding the man, Mr. Bell, who battered that lady. We also had the issue regarding that young child who was unalived and sexually assaulted and molested by that gentleman who was killed unalive. Now, also, I'd wanted to get, and hopefully she may come in, the president of the social workers in Jamaica. And also, I want to talk about also regarding UIC, United Independent Congress. And that is the new a political party in Jamaica, because the emphasis has been on PNP and JLP. But then I juxtapose and I bring in the UK, where we talk about Nigel Farage, and we say Nigel Farage reform just really came in right after the last election. Actually, the anniversary of the South election was, I think it was yesterday, when Richard Sunak stood out in the rain at number 10 Downing Street and called the election for July. Nigel Farage reform came on the scene then, and waboom. Right now, the reform is now deemed to be the main opposition to the Labour Party, because the Conservative Party is somewhat, I wouldn't say it is, finished or so. That won't happen to the Conservative Party. But right now, after 14 years in power, and the Labour Party keeps saying 14 years of mismanagement, 22 million black hole. But what you're seeing after the recent local government election, the Reform Party took about 10 councils. They won most of the seats, and the polls, they're actually killing it. So I'm saying, hang on a second, they seem to be the kingmaker, the deal breaker. So what should I say then about a party like UIC in Jamaica making a difference? Can it be? Will it be? Mark you, there was a coalition in the UK before with Conservative and the Lib Dems, WD and W Dum, Dim and Dum, which is Tony Blair and not Tony Blair, David Cameron and Nick Clegg. So there's a possibility. But I'm going to bring in first Miss Olivia Shaw Bell, and hear what she's about, actually, because we got very interesting people. Just like when I'm walking in the park and I'm starting doing these videos, talking with people who we have never seen before. Who are the people in your neighborhood? They are the people that you meet each day. But I'm going to bring in shortly Miss Olivia Shaw Lovett. Olivia, hey, I can't hear you. Oh, you're muted. Did I mute you or you muted yourself? I
No,
think
I think to myself, greetings,
you muted
greetings.
yourself. Greetings and greetings and salutation. How are you, Olivia?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm cool in the Malibu. It's after 10. I know you're I don't know why you went outside trying to make me feel bad because
You
I'm
know,
your
I
guy.
have to give you some of the sunlight. I know you where you are, you don't really get much of it.
Well, actually, we had some good sunshine. Actually, as I put it on in the videos, I got some lovely sunshine these past few days. But this is a bank holiday weekend, and the bank holiday weekend they say it's gonna rain. Do you know what a bank holiday is? You know what a bank holiday in the UK
Yes,
is?
well, I can't tell you the full definition of what it is, but I just know it's a time where everybody gets time off work, and you get to rest. I don't know. Does it have anything to do with actual bank?
Well,
But I
actually,
know it's a
actually
time period for citizens
well,
of the UK to get some time off.
well, what it is actually is that people are able to go to the bank, line up in the queue, and the first person that gets into the bank can take as much money they can. That's how it is. That's what a bank holiday is.
Ha
So,
ha ha
there's limited amount of
ha
people
ha
that is
ha.
able to do that, and that's it. So I'm queuing up. I got my chair, and I'm gonna go to what should I say, HSBC on Monday morning very early.
Okay, okay.
That's what a bank holiday is.
I know that's not true.
Do you know that I said that to somebody one time, and they literally believe me? They literally, and and then it's like my daughter can't keep a secret and can't keep a smile off of my face. So then believe.
Should give it
That's a
up.
bank holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey David, how are you on TikTok and sister? But listen, tell us about we you have been a lot of time commenting on different issues, but tell us about yourself and what you're doing in Trinidad. I mean, you're Jamaican. What's going on in Trinidad there?
I'm in Trinidad because of love, love and marriage. So
Okay.
I'm married
Okay.
to a Trinidadian. Well, they call it Trinbagonian because you cannot leave out the island of Trinidad, Tobago.
Yes.
And he's from Tobago. So we're here with our children for a time just to relax, get some sunshine, reconnect with family, and so forth. But Jamaica is my roots,
Yes.
and my home. I was there a few months ago. Yeah.
But also, we had some discussions in regards to gender violence issues in Jamaica of recent days with the recent developments. And one of the reasons why I said I wanted to keep this alive and keep it on the topic is because normally after 7 days or 9 days, things sort of die. And all of a sudden, something pushes it off the agenda because you had the little girl which was unalive and molested. Then the guy got killed. Then somehow I'm not hearing anything more about that. I don't know
Yeah.
if you are. And then the recent lady who was beaten up by the man there. Okay, he's in prison and he's going through the process, but you're not hearing too much as to the bigger picture. And then that has been somewhat maybe pushed to the back burner because of the Mario Dean recent police crime. What should I say? The trial, which concluded with the three police being found guilty. So you wonder if things just keep being pushed aside. So I wanted you to say something about the whole gender bit and what you do in regards to um, this area.
So for the past 10 years, I've started a nonprofit organization called Women of Destiny,
Yes,
outside of based in Mount Salem, Montego Bay. And
yes,
our work has been expansive over the island and even in the region. And our work, when we recognize that we are creating a safe space for women who are marginalized, and what does that really mean is that you're normally like segregated, um, and considered in a box for whatever reason or another. And for me, it's more on the socioeconomic class that I'm from. And so we kind of created a safe space to see how we could help each other to grow beyond this invisible box that we are stuck in. But when I realized in that safe space, we had over 90% of us in that room
Yeah.
had gone through abuse. And I recognized that this was such a prevalent thing. And then when you grow up in a community that is notorious for crime and violence, it's become such a norm for you to see women getting beaten, or for persons not just physical abuse, but emotional abuse, financial abuse. It becomes a part of the culture and the norm. So our work started gearing more focused on not just every marginalized woman, but predominantly the women who are victims or survivors of gender-based violence.
Mm.
And for the past 10 years, I can tell you, so I've been on the ground. We're working as a grassroots organization. I've also worked in the States as well. And I said I did a bit of regional work here in Trinidad and Tobago. You would
Yes.
recognize that there is this cultural tolerance of violence and abuse in the Jamaican culture. And so, because it's so normalized, we create a riot and a fuss when we hear about it. But then we go back to our everyday life. It is not something that is on our forefront because we're so used to it. If this was something that we're not used to, then we would want it to change because it's making us uncomfortable. And we're like, no, 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 we don't want this anymore. And that's why you kind of have that nine mentality of weeping and moaning over an incident that is public. And I want to put that very, very broad, that is public. We
Yes.
create this ruckus about it, but then nothing happens after that because we're so used to it. Am I saying that is right? No, it's not. But that is the reality of what is happening in Jamaica.
Right. Right. And then with the recent incident which took place, and the demonstration which took place by the nurses and women in media, and so what do you see as the bigger picture than just that particular incident, the whole scale issue regarding gender violence and DV and all those sort of things with women?
I mean, the bigger picture is that the government has to now do something. Because when you have civil servants who are core backbone of a nation being affected, and again, because it's public, I'm not saying it's never happened, it's just because it's public now, there is a sense of accountability and a push for the government to do something about it. And so,
Mm.
we had the protest of the nurses, and a question I had posed to you offline was, why is it that it was just the nurses? Probably one or two other civilians were a part of it, but what about an altogether collective island wide protest where it doesn't matter if you're a nurse, because if we're all here on earth, for some reason or another, when we are part of Jamaica, you'd have interacted with a healthcare professional. So this
Yes.
should bother you, but because it's not really in everybody's doorstep, they really, it's the nurse problem now, and the nurse are protesting about it. But from
Yeah.
that, the office of the prime minister had put out a statement concerning looking at the registry. I think from the incidents with
Yes.
the young girl, they had put out a statement regarding the registry of the offenders. And then for this, they had also talked about the Domestic Violence Act and the reform that is coming, and they kind of named the professor who is leading that charge, etc.
You mean in
But
regards to
again,
you mean in
go
regards to
ahead.
sex offender register? Is that what you're talking?
No, not just that. Against not just the registry, but against the DV Act
Yeah.
and support. Yeah. So there's some changes that they're gonna reconsider and so forth. But at the same time, my question is always, why do we react? And why is
Yes.
it that this cultural norm is not priority
Yeah.
for our government?
Yes, yes. Well, thanks for that opening there, and another day we'll have to dig into you going to all these different countries with your husband and sort of use it as an inspirational tool because you're living by faith, isn't it? At the same time,
Yes,
by
yes, we
sight.
are.
We walk by faith.
Thank
Well,
you.
secondly, I've got Mr. Winston Wright. Is a member of parliament, aspiring, you know, parliamentary aspirant for UIC, United Independent Congress. He's a father of three and 23-year veteran of aviation with a regional reputation for success in airport and airline operations. He's a trained aviation safety professional with over 15 years as an aviation firefighter and holds the FAA certification in the field. Mr. Wright is a former trade unionist, life insurance underwriter, freelance journalist, and photographer while present working in facilities management. Now, it's very interesting that I wanted to get someone from UIC because I don't want to stick with the typical narrative of just talking to JLP and PNP, but to hear their perspective. But the interesting thing also for Mr. Wright is also the shadow speaker or the spokesperson UIC for law and governance. But I'm going to bring him in, and he can sort of talk about that. Good evening, Mr. Wright. How are you doing, sir? Oh, you're on mute. Did I mute you or you mute yourself?
I muted myself.
You mute yourself. Okay. How
Good
you doing?
afternoon to the Jamaicans locally listening, and good
Yes.
evening to you, Silver. Good evening to Mrs. Shaw Lovell. All right, so in terms of, let's start with the unfortunate incident with
Yes.
our healthcare professional. UIC, like any other civic-minded organization, condemns violence. But not just this act of violence. UIC has always been against violence. As a matter of fact, in our manifesto and our constitution, we have made it clear that UIC as an organization believes that the only justifiable use of force is self-defense. And from
Yes.
the images published, we don't see self-defense as a factor in the incident. Now, violence of any kind is a terrible thing, and violence against somebody that is in a position of let's say lesser strength, don't want to be disingenuous, is a
Yes.
terrible thing. For example, the healthcare professional that we witnessed on camera being victimized, as well as the tragic unaliving of that young child. And our spokesperson on interfaith relations and human rights protection published a press release about that, and we tried to sensitize the public at large, including having a march on the matter to say we need to do better at protecting vulnerable demographics in this country.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, most of Jamaica is a very vulnerable demographic by virtue of either economic, gender, or social circumstance. And it is a tough fight for the UIC to bring that level of awareness to the nation, to say that it is within our own hands to solve this problem. Now, when we speak of governmental intervention, persons usually understand it to mean those elected to serve us must solve the problem. But what we have to understand that the solution to these social problems start with us, and the UIC wants to empower the nation to see that, and then hold our government accountable for putting concrete systems in place for making this happen. So we see where the police was able to investigate within a day. I wish most crimes were investigated within a day and solvable within a day, with the apprehension of the accused and with charges being leveled against him. And these are some serious charges, and I'll read: assault occasioning actual bodily harm, assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, assault at common law, possessing a firearm with intent to commit a first.
This is the charges laid against the man.
The accused, yes.
Mr. Bell, yeah.
Yes. And possession of a firearm with intent to cause injuries. And the last two firearm charges indicate that Mr. Bell, being a licensed firearm holder, is accused of using his firearm in a non-prescribed manner.
Yeah.
In the commission of the accused act. And therefore, under the new firearms regulations and the new Firearms Act, he has been so charged.
Yes.
But let me take us on a different approach, Silver.
Before I do that, I just clarify the area where you are the spokesperson for with UIC. What's the area that you're the spokesperson for? I mentioned law, but I think there's more, isn't it?
It's national security, justice, and defense.
Right. Okay. And do you see yourself as winning the seat where you're running for?
I'll make no predictions, but I was listening to your segue at the opening, and when you spoke about Nigel Farage, and I
Yes.
remember when he was being heckled heavily, and
Mm.
you know he was the butt of jokes for the late night pundit saying that he'll never see the seat of
Yes.
power, and here he is now, and we look as far afield as Canada, where the current prime minister was also heckled in a similar light. The
Well,
UIC is
well,
going to.
also, well, also, I can actually come in there. Tom Hanks said Donald Trump will never ever be president until the sky comes down and blah blah blah. You know? So anything can happen in this world.
Yeah, you see, I'd like to look at that one as while it was inevitable, it
Yeah.
is a situation. It is a situation that reflects a very strong social discord. But our neighbors to what would be my west, I leave them to figure out that matter. But as it
Yes.
pertains to the UIC, we are positioning ourselves as a movement. Firstly, because we don't consider ourselves a party, as in the traditional sense of party politics, but rather a movement with strong Garvey ideals looking to liberate not only the mind, but the economy of our nation. And as a movement, we are positioning ourselves to give the people firstly an alternative, and then be in a position to be able to, and without giving away trade secrets, as you would say, to intervene when
Yeah.
that 63% that have been turned away from the political system realize that they need to do is what the British did and what the Canadians did, look to the alternative.
Can I just ask a question to Olivia? Olivia, I'm not pulling you into this because we weren't going to talk about, but you're here. You're on mute. What's your take on UIC, a third party in Jamaica, making a wave, making a difference, if anything?
Well, I would say that is very commendable. Unfortunately, for me, I'm just finding about this organization. And I would take that on my own onus that I may not have been more aware of current affairs as to what is happening. But as a young Jamaican, this is something that I've always been advocating for another voice, an independent voice in the sense of let's move away from the tribalism narrative of holding to green and orange. Yes, I'm wearing green, but this is the top I had.
Oh, you're wearing
But
green and I'm wearing red. That doesn't say
yes,
anything. And
it's and I'm
wearing blue.
yeah. So
That's right.
it doesn't for me. I would not. I'm as a young millennial. I'm
Yes,
saying I don't vote based on a political
yes.
affiliations from my foreparents, right? I want someone who understands the challenges that we're going through and is willing to make those changes and actually put our voices at the center of these solutions because we are living it, we have the knowledge. And so to hear Mr. Wright mention that that is a core function of how they operate as a movement, it is very inspiring and hopeful. And I think that once we have hope, we can get the change.
It's that you're that boss. Once you got hope, you
I've
get the
heard that. What I'll do is say to Mrs. Shaw Lovell that to avail herself of our information, she can, and anybody else who's curious that's watching, uicjamaica.com, that's our website. And we're very active across social media at UIC Jamaica. And that's our handle across all social media. So the information is there, but don't blame yourself because there's a very active, and I do mean active, what would I like to call it now? A very active movement to keep the UIC voice very still, and when not still, muffled. For example, our meetings get spammed with pornography, our sites and our recordings get heckled and reported on a regular basis. We have been shadow banned so many times, it's not funny. So it is a struggle, especially when traditional media, mainstream media, refuses to carry our press releases. For example, there's a beautiful press release by Professor Brian Cameron about the young child that was unalive, and a call to action for others to join us in a march of sensitization, and that wasn't carried by mainstream media, even though I was the one who personally shared it. So, but you heard other voices. So
It's interesting what you said right there, because I think at one point I was speaking to Joseph Patterson. Joseph Patterson is the head of the organization, um, Olivia, and there are some prayer breakfasts which take place around Jamaica times, and I always say, where is UIC in these prayer breakfasts as well? And normally Winston, it's not there. It doesn't happen, isn't it? They don't
no,
invite.
we have never received that invitation. And let me explain how the system works for those who are wondering if it is laziness on the UIC part or tardiness on the part of the organizers. The UIC has to be registered as a political organization and
Yes.
pay dues and stay current with the ECJ to practice, to be on this
Yes.
platform telling you that we are a registered political party. Now, the ECJ's board is made up of PNP and JLP dominated members, party affiliates, associates, acolytes, and so on. All the beautiful name you can use for them. And
Yes.
every year, they receive all our information, from our finances to even membership information they try to request. And that is always a battle for us. So the two parties are very aware of our existence and what our finances look like, as paltry as they are, because we are an organization that only rely on membership donation. We don't accept special interest donations. If anyone from the special interest groups want to donate to the UIC, it should only be on an altruistic basis, meaning they want a third party to have a voice, not to dominate what we believe in or what we preach or what we practice on behalf of membership, but solely out of altruism, so persons have another voice, an alternative. So because of that,
Yeah.
we don't get those finances. And the traditional parties, the colonial parties, are very aware of that because of that. Now, any organization that is doing anything political can avail themselves of the assistance of the ECJ to know who do I invite. Now, there are a lot of persons saying, oh, I want an alternative or I want a change in the political landscape.
Yeah.
But the UIC is the third registered. Here's a recent, not going to plug them here.
Oh, there's a fourth one now.
Right. But they were only, and I say this is my personal opinion, they were given the heckling and the hard task of fighting their way through the registration process because there was a move to dilute our voting pool at the last general election.
Yes.
They didn't know that we would have opted out of our belief in personal fairness, well, not personal, but organizational fairness and transparency to the people, not to participate in that election because of the circumstances. We can remember it was a pandemic as so declared, but there was still room for an election, even though everybody was quote unquote dying. So we chose to push the government in a different direction then. They refused and in their own interest acted. People didn't see that. But anyway, the point I'm making is simply this. Everybody's aware of us. When they were having the last set of political debates, we reached out to them and said, hey, how come you're organizing a debate and you have not reached out to the UIC and invited us to participate? They said, well, listen, you're a new party, and if you want to participate in these debates, you need to go and commission a poll that shows that you have support of 1/3, I think. Don't quote me on that. 1/3 of the population, the voting population. We were like, why? We are a registered party. If we have been registered, if we have gone through the process of showing that a certain percentage of the island, because you have to get a certain percentage to be registered. They have been to sign that petition, and they have signed that petition to make us a party. I said that UIC is a party, then why do we need to do this again?
So do you think then that one should have the level of reliance on people accepting you, or really one need to really engage with the people directly and build that from the ground root going up?
Definitely, it's engaging the people and growing from the ground up, and that is what we've been doing since 2019. It is a very slow process because of all the obstacles that we have faced.
Yeah.
But we are doing it on a daily basis, candidate by candidate, community by community, division by division. But the other parties had 80 years to do it. We have only started since 2019. Yeah. So
I want to bring in something here, and there is breaking news. I don't know if you know about it, Olivia, of this gentleman called the late Mario Dean. The jury in Jamaica found 3 police officers guilty in connection with the 2014 death of Mario Dean, 31-year-old construction worker, who was beaten while in police custody for possession of a marijuana spliff. The officers, Corporal Elaine Stewart, District Constable Marlon Grant, and Juliana Clevon, there's 2 ladies in it, and a man, were convicted of manslaughter by gross negligence and misconduct in a public office. Stewart was also found guilty of perverting the course of justice for allegedly ordering the cleaning of the cell where Dean was attacked before investigators arrived. Verdict was reached after a 36-day trial, with the jury returning a 6-1 decision on each count. Officers will return to court for sentencing on July the 1st, and their bail has been extended until there were additional comments. The mother, I was listening to the mother, and she was saying, Miss Fraser, what she said, she's happy, or she can't believe, and she's ecstatic somehow that justice is found in Jamaica. Winston, I'm going to come to you on this. She expressed relief and emotional gratitude after the verdict, calling it a step toward justice for her son and others affected by the similar violence. And I didn't follow this case from the start, because, the unfortunate thing with Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen, is that so many things happen and it just slip on by. And it's recently just listening to the whole thing about the Dean sustained a fractured skull, linear fractures on both sides, bleeding in the brain, swelling due to the trauma, lacerated wound to the left eyebrow, compression and strangulation, bruises on the neck, muscles, severe bruising of the chair. I'm just paraphrasing some aspect. Other injuries, abrasion on his back, abdomen, consistent internal trauma. What do you say about that, Winston? In light of the fact that you're having cases now whereby persons who are, alleged gunmen, I gotta say they're alleged gunmen, alleged killers or whatever, but they have been unalived because of confrontation. Is it that justice is changing in a way for the sake of getting rid of these bad men? Because it seemed to be that with Mario Dean, if certain things didn't push, more than likely he would have been passed on like another bad man.
Now, let me answer you, and I'm going to be honest and tell you that my answer is going to be long-winded, because to understand this case, you have to understand not only the perception of justice in Jamaica, but also the perception of policing in Jamaica. Yeah. As a young man, I found myself in a position, fully employed in a quasi-government job, supporting an extended family, going to school, etc. I found myself in a situation where it could have turned tragic, just like any other story that you hear here with that interaction with the police. Not because I'm a violent or irresponsible person, but just because of, one, the heightened sense of response that is instilled in the police, including the need to treat everyone they come across with suspicion and hostility, and unless they feel that they don't need to. Okay? Yeah. Now, let's look at Mario Dean. For anyone who hails this verdict as a victory, including the family, it doesn't mean that they're anti-police, because that is the narrative that was created recently when the Prime Minister decided to allow the police to use taxpayer dollars to propagandize the nation by saying we're blue to support the police in a counter march against the Jamaicans for justice.
Yes.
Now, the UIC doesn't openly support any other group. What we have always said is this: we believe that law enforcement should abide by the law as well. So justice is not only for the ordinary citizen, but also for law enforcers. Yes. We strongly believe in that. And we have challenged the commissioner himself to make sure that steps are taken to make sure quality policing is provided in Jamaica. There is strong oversight of policing activity, not internal oversight, which is known, which has been proven to be faulty, but strong independent oversight. And as part of that oversight, to encourage as well as initiate proven actions that supports that. So, for example, we hear the furor about wearing body-worn cameras, and UIC fully supports the need for that, because it not only clarifies policing actions and make investigations of their actions more transparent and easily accommodated, it also makes the actions of civilians in those interactions be more scrutinizable. So we support that. We also have gone further as an organization and said to the commissioner, you also need to make sure that your use of force policy is codified and gazetted across the entire nation to include the force. So
Yes.
everyone knows that, because it is important that the state has the ability to project lethal force. But how is that force used against a sovereign group that has the right to life, liberty, and property must be open to one, question, and two, scrutiny. Not because we are anti-law and order or anti-establishment, but rather we want to make sure that the state isn't victimizing those who gathered them together to serve. It is simple as that. So we have also gone ahead and said, hey, one of the things we would do as an organization, as a party for the people, is establish a shooting review board so that every police shooting action will be scrutinized to make sure that the reporting, the ballistic, and any other evidence in this matter, they all cooperate to tell the same story, so that way there is transparency. All of this has been ignored by not only the commissioner, the prime minister, and the minister of justice, the minister of national security, because they have gone ahead and since 2022 have been pushing, and that is why we're at this point. We can remember when the national security minister went to Westmoreland and in a police forum said, hey, shoot them and we'll provide you with legal assistance. I can remember that. Okay? And the prime minister doubled down and so on. We have always thought that hard policing in Jamaica is the way to go. And when you look at it and realize that policing in Jamaica has almost, what would you call it now? Almost a 300-year history.
Yes.
Right? But independent Jamaica is only 60 years old. So in those other 200 and odd years, what was the initiator, the incubator of policing doing? Then, of course, with my father being a Rastafarian, you talk about the Carl Gardens incident for those who are aware of that. And look at what the government sponsored with their policing operative. You realize that the force has consistently, since the day of servitude, been used to victimize the populace. So the UIC has pledged to change from a police force to a police service, one that respects every citizen's right to life, liberty, and property.
You just said moving from a police force to a police service. So
Correct.
is it that the police force is deemed to be like a quasi somewhat police state environment? Because I think I was listening to someone and they said that they're sorry for the police. And when they say they're sorry for the police, they're sorry for the police because unfortunately the government has placed them in this situation where they have given them so much powers. And they're using it randomly, you know? And I notice this word keep coming up a lot, which is confrontation. That's a new one. My brother, I was in Jamaica one year, Olivia. I was in Jamaica, and the news media, the news was out about a particular incident. And while my brother was driving, he actually repeated exactly what the reporter was going to say. He said exactly what the reporter was going to say about confrontation, blah 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 blah. You know, Olivia. Sorry, yeah.
I wanted to add to the fact that I concur most of what you are stating, but I think we need to add a little ad lib to the end of that to say the victimization or the force is targeted at a specific group of Jamaicans. Because when we talk as Jamaicans with certain kind of experience, I always tell people that my lived experience as a Black Jamaican is far different than the Indian, Chinese, and the whites, the uptown Jamaicans. So you have uptown blacks, but they're so different than the experience. So for me, as you, like you, Mr. Wright, you would have engaged the police in a manner or had an incident with a police that you had no question if this was going to be the end of you. And because I'm from Mount Salem, I've been called, hey, girl, dirty girl, come here, so girl. You know, like I am not considered and spoke to in any respectable way when I am approached in my community. It's always, I am wrong until they can prove otherwise. And that goes to the other residents of these spaces of inner city communities. And even when we look at the genesis of what we consider the inner city communities, there has been a lot of programming into the narrative. As you say, what is the incubation of our policing that we have not really uprooted, and we are not changing. We are just moving along. And now we are getting to a place. I said it to Mr. Silburn off air that our country is going to a state almost as of a dictatorship where we don't have I'm from a community where I don't feel safe to call the police because I am wrong before I'm even questioned, because I am from Mount Salem. That is the narrative of how people look at my ID and say, wait, you sure you come from Salem? You understand what is that programming that you have gone through in the police force that you have not stopped to question? Why do I interact with a resident of Mount Salem different than one from Westgate Hills, which is not far, like with next door neighbors? So what is that in your brain? And these are some narratives that has been instilled in us from early years that we have not stopped to really question. And it's a cultural thing that it will take generations to change, but it requires an intentional action in this era. So I just wanted to say that we needed to say that that experience that we're talking about with police force, we don't, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It doesn't go for the uptown Jamaicans. And who want vex. You don't get raided like that. You don't get shoot up like that. They come in Salem, them shoot up the house. You don't go uptown for no bad man and shoot up the house. Never, never. But in Salem, in Flankers, in Conroe, they must shoot before them question anything. And it's something that is just so acceptable. And we're like, aren't we all the same people? But that is what is conditioned in our people for a while now.
True. And I'll go further and point out that I've had good interactions with officers as well as bad interactions. But what we have to look at is the core d'esprit, that institutional mindset, that blue wall, that blue gang that exists. And when I first heard of the concept of gangs infiltrating organizations like this, I thought it was nonsense, because how can organizations that are so well functioning be infiltrated? And I watched a documentary on a notorious gang infiltrating the US Army to learn certain skills to go back to dominate the streets. And then I started hearing the same concept in Jamaica. Right? Not from the hierarchy of the force, not from the commissioner, not from the Minister of National Security. You'll hear them downplaying. No one remembers the amount of quote-unquote death squad investigations that happened in the early part of the 2000s. Okay? I, from history, remembers that every election cycle, there is a round of bad men that goes down in confrontations. Before now, it was escaped in nearby bushes and found suffering from gunshot wounds. Now you hear.
Actually, that was what my brother was saying. Escape and found with. Yeah, it's changing. Yeah.
And so now it has changed to this. Now there are two reasons for that, of course. Obviously, these releases are being released from a corporate source that was created within the force. I believe that's foolishness. That should end. As a matter of fact, I listened to the commissioner speak on the force, and he said, listen, I have 18,000 members and 14,000 on active duty at any given time. So I can't give them all cameras because storage and battery life and evidentiary purposes and all of that makes it impossible. The other areas with such a big force that does it, yes, there's resources needed, but those stolen and siphoned resources that we are missing, the almost $1 trillion that is missing from the different ministries, and the 1 how much trillion that is missing overall from mismanagement and waste, can do that, right? But here it is. We need to move away from a police force to a service, one that isn't controlled by the political directorate, one that is independent to investigate any crime, anywhere. And most importantly, the rule of law, a clearly codified set of rules, including the rules of engagement. So every citizen, regardless of where you're from, whether Westgate Hills or Mount Salem, will understand that if I face the police and I obey certain lawful instructions, and I use the term lawful because those instructions have to be, then the interaction will go this way. If I disobey an unlawful instruction, the interaction should go this way. If I project force against the police, the interaction will go this way. And that is why every time I speak on police action in Jamaica, I keep asking the commissioner, I keep asking the government to make sure there's a codified rules of engagement, a use of force policy that everyone can understand clearly. Now, it doesn't mean that the police won't act extrajudiciously, but it does make it easier to investigate when you bring it together with all the other variables. And that is where we are right now. But
you know what? One of the things I say all the while, and just like when you got Vision 2030, all of you know about Vision 2030. That is where Jamaica to become a fully developed country in 2030.
Yeah.
And it's like a bipartisan agreed policy, the PIOJ, Planning Institute of Jamaica, I believe, that put this together, and everyone fall in line with it. I'm sure UIC is a party to the Vision 2030.
no,
Isn't it? Okay, stick a pin right there, don't move. And I keep saying all the while, if you got a Vision 2030 and all parties are working with that, you shouldn't really have a manifesto. All you really should be having is the workability of it. And if it is not working, then you vote out the other person if they're not working with the whole process. In regard to crime, I keep saying all the while that crime should be something which is engineered between all the different stakeholders. So therefore, the PNP, the JLP, the churches, UIC as well, Planning Institute, PIO, the PSOJ, all come together, and that is the master crime plan. So therefore, if UIC win the next election, that's a crime plan. Of course, I'm tweaking it. PNP win the next election, that's the crime plan. But it's like everyone wants to create their own thing. And by virtue of such, you're living for 5 years. And every 5 years, they change the whole thing, because recently the state of emergency was deemed to be illegal. You can speak on that, Winston. Yeah,
All right, so let's start firstly with Vision 2030. UIC is not a part of that simply because Vision 2030.
Why not? Why not? You're a part of 2030.
We were never invited because the first thing we would have said is that this is not our plan. This is an offshoot of the UN Sustainable Millennium Development Goals.
Yeah.
And this does not serve Jamaica. Let us create our own vision for the way forward. That is the first thing that UIC would point out. So we're not opposed to creating a vision 2030, 2040, or 2050. As a matter of fact, we should have had a vision 1990 from 1962.
Yes.
You understand? As a matter of fact, anyway, let me not go down that rabbit hole. So UIC would have pointed out that very simple fact that everyone seeks to ignore, that the strings of our political directorate are being pulled somewhere else. And the UIC will not be a part of that. We are a Garvey-inspired movement that believe that our change and our destiny is in our own hands. And we should channel the energies and the resources of our people to create the solutions to the problems of our people. Not pander to persons who may want to use us for their own ends, which is what is happening. As it pertains to the solution for crime, the solution for crime has eluded us for the simple reason, as I said before, from 1962, our strings are being pulled elsewhere. The political parties, the two colonial parties, I hope everyone can remember when they imported guns, created dons, and reigned anarchy in the nation. And no one in those parties has ever been investigated or indicted for treason or any other crime associated with those activities. Right? And they can't create the solution to a problem that they create. Because here we are, they will consistently have to create loopholes for their friends and connected ones to be able to beat these charges. Most of the politicians in the houses of representatives are lawyers who are their clients. Simple, straightforward question. And I move on from there. So we need an independent police force, one that is subjected to proper oversight of an independently elected Senate as promised by the United Independence Congress. And we need to throw away the vestiges of colonialism that we have held on to for all these years. When you look at all these defunct laws or irrelevant laws that are on our books that every now and then they pop up, or a shrewd prime minister like the one we currently have wield it in an unbecoming manner. Look at the representation of the People's Act. Look at the various electoral acts. Right now, there was an editorial in the newspaper that talked about electoral financing.
Yeah.
Right? But yet we hear the parties talk about it, but no lip service. UIC has a simple solution. Make all electoral activities 100% publicly funded. Give all candidates at all levels access to the same thing. Same pictures, same television interviews, same town hall meetings.
Once they are a registered party, that's what you're saying. Once they're a registered party.
Correct?
Yeah.
No, hold on. Before we move on from the justice system.
Yeah.
Right now, the most telling example of how broken our justice system is the current miscarriage of justice against our president, Mr. Joseph Patterson.
Yes,
he was arrested and charged under the Disaster Risk Management Act. Right? The Disaster Risk Management Act and several actions under the Disaster Risk Management Act have been struck down already. Mr. Patterson has made a constitutional challenge, and it took him 2 years to get his hearing, and it's now going a year plus waiting for the ruling in that hearing. But here we are. The PNP was able to get their ruling in probably 3 months. The Prime Minister, he's in 90 days. As a matter of fact, the PNP went to the courts about 3 times and won. There are several pieces of landmark legislation that the Prime Minister brought to fore through his Attorney General and Justice Minister that has been challenged and struck down to date, including their Bail Act, including a section of their Gang Act, and so on. They're a government that is either inept when it comes to the wording of the law or willfully ignorant and seek to twist the rights of the people, wrangle it away from them and put it in a court that they control. Because if a court cannot give a ruling in a simple, straightforward matter that is of public interest, what is the holdup? Back to you, Silver.
There are 5 points which was flagged up, and I saw with one of your press releases, and it's very interesting that it's unfortunate. I sense the media. This is me. I sense the media in Jamaica is not really independent and very authentic. I think they are very wishy-washy to a certain extent, save for a few of these brave journalists out there. But since taking office in 2016, the Prime Minister administration has repeatedly come under legal scrutiny, with courts delivering several landmark rulings against the government. These cases paint a troubling picture of persistent executive overreach and raise concerns about the erosions of constitutional safeguards in Jamaican democracy. One major case involved the use of pre-signed, undated resignation letters from opposition senators. The Constitutional Court ruled that holeless use of such letters was unconstitutional, null and void, as it violated the principles of parliamentary independence and democratic integrity. This decision sent a clear message that political manipulation of legislative process would not be tolerated under the rule of law. Another serious controversy emerged in 2018 when Holness appointed Justice Brian Sykes as the UIC and the United Independent takes on a national significance. Patterson was, hang on a second, am I getting this all mixed up here? Yeah. Appointed Brian Sykes as the acting, where is it there? The acting
Chief
Justice, yeah. Sorry, I got it mixed up. Stating that a permanent appointment would be based on his performance. The conditional approach was widely criticized as an affront to judicial independence after sustained backlash from the legal community and civil society. Holness was forced to reverse course and confirm Sykes permanently. And the bit regarding the UIC taking on national significance, Patterson was arrested during a peaceful protest against COVID-19 mandates and is now challenging the constitution of the Disaster Risk Management Act and Public Order Act under which he was detained. So therefore, there are some really inconsistencies, and it shows that the government at the same time is going against constitution a lot and keep losing these things.
Correct. Now, what you can imagine, what would happen if the DRMA and the supporting legislation that were used to oppress the people at that time remove our choices is found unconstitutional, the remedies and ramifications would be enormous. The government can't afford another embarrassment. So they're seeking to keep Joseph's ruling under wraps. But here we are. They're saying that the permanent appointment of the Chief Justice under their
Yeah.
offered employment would be dependent on his performance. What would he need to do? Is it what he's doing now? So you see, the level of incestuous interdependence created in this colonial system was meant to allow the colonizer to rape this nation, and that continues today. And in the presence of a lady, please, I don't wish to offend your sensibility.
No,
but
no, no. I agree. No, that's the exact word that needs to be used.
Right?
You got a permission. You got a permission.
And here we are, as a nation that was supposedly independent for 62 years, we're unable to even provide the basics for our nation. We see where recently the Planning Institute and Statin published a report that poverty has been reduced in Jamaica. I was at the supermarket and the market today, and I don't see where poverty has been reduced. I go further and say that a year ago, Joseph L. Patterson was laughed at on national television for stating same, because the measure of poverty that is used in Jamaica was instilled to us by our overseas bankers that we're using to say, oh, poverty has declined in Jamaica. But in actuality, even the recent decline in the value of the Jamaican dollar should tell us that this is a farce.
I want
first time Jamaican dollar has hit $160. How can poverty decline when our spending decline?
I want to come in there, and I want Oliver to come in after this. You have said it a few times, and I know you say it because you're being political correct, that post-independence, 1962, my philosophy is this. How can one be independent and yet you're swearing allegiance to a foreign power, to the king? I said this many time ago, and I think about 10 years now, I've not taken my children or my wife to any independent service. Deep in my heart, I cannot go anymore. So I don't go to any of these things that I commission in the UK. I've stopped for a while now because on my hand on my heart, I cannot do that. I believe in 1962, when we said we're having independence, that is the process of starting to lead to independence, like when you become a republic or so. I believe when that 1962 came, Olivia and Winston, there should have been a process of land apportion to the people to give them a leg up so they can start something. But as you rightly say, Winston and Olivia, I'm going to ask you to come in. The same colonial mentality is there. All it done is just translate down to the black bourgeoisie. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that's why you got this UDC thing, controlling things and then selling out the place. And I'm saying, selling out the land, the beach and everything. And I'm saying, this is wrong. So therefore, you need a new level of leadership in a way. And I'm sorry, it can't be a democratic style that can really, like Buck and Fun, like Abraham
Burkina Faso. Yeah, we need a revolution. But while as I said before, I wish I had knew about your party before, because I'm a strong advocate for decolonizing our narratives, decolonizing everything that we are as a people. And this word came into my language when I went to the UK. So you can just imagine my mentality from a young girl from Mount Salem, and then going to dispute the land. You have arrived, the land that I've arrived into and I realized how oppressed we have been, and not so much by the UK themselves, but by our own people. And you rightfully said that we have not paid attention to the colonial parties that continue to rule our nation, because a lot of people are not aware of the history. And when I talk about people, I talk about my generation, the one who would have gotten a bit of free education to some extent. We would have we are one of the most educated populace, and you would think that we would be reading and understanding and be able to recognize the narrative that we have been sold to how we operate and how the country runs, and recognize that there's something wrong, grievously wrong with that. And it is because, even just a simple beach act that was created before we got independence, I keep asking the question, Mr. Silburn, why are these things not prioritized? Why are these things not important? And if we are not taking care of the human capital of our nation, then we have failed. We have failed. And I'm telling you, the majority of Jamaicans are poor. Well, I will consider being in the middle class because you're working and you're having some income, but then you have to have a lifestyle that is debt dependent because where you're from, you have to now buy a different house to get out of the crime infested community. Now you have that mortgage, you have to buy a car and all of these things. And so you live a life that is so that you can't even see what you're working for. I know people with businesses that cannot afford grocery in Jamaica, but poverty is down. So I asked the question on my TikTok recently with Mr. Silburn, and persons were saying that they're not seeing the financial changes in their lifestyle to say that they're no longer poor, but obviously the infrastructural development around them would say that they're no longer poor. So my question is, why is that the priority? And then we have to, you said they have the colonial powers that they have to appease, and what is focused, and everything is sold out. And who is doing these developments that we are seeing that look so beautiful and we're excited for? Um, and what happens to us as people? Like, are we really feeling the benefit of that?
I think Winston wants to invite you into his party. The way he's looking so excited.
I'm very excited to have Mrs. Shaw Lovell join us. I mean, we speak the same language, and I'll share again with you. The website is uicjamaica.com. It's UIC Jamaica across all social media. I'm looking forward, and if you want, listen, Silburn can give you my number. Please reach out. I know the Mount Salem area very well. I lived in Rosemont Gardens for many years. I have friends in Mount Salem still. I go there occasionally to visit, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I know where your neighbor is and the difference, where Thinger Lane is and Catherine Mount and the
Mm-hmm.
difference in terms of the security forces.
Yes.
I know the entire story.
Mm.
So come join us. Let's do some great work together. Okay? But I will answer your question though. And Silburn hit on it when he mentioned land. And that's why the UIC and we talk about new people, new thinking, new philosophy. We talk about land reparation. Okay? Because we understand. They didn't give us land because they understand that it creates what? Generational wealth. Look at
Yes.
all the old families in Jamaica. What do they have? It's not necessarily liquid asset, but rather land. Okay? And they leverage that to create and maintain generational wealth. Now, I recently explained to a young lady that if you bought a piece of land and you put a little house on it with a mortgage, and in paying that mortgage down, you have a child that ends up in university, and you look at equity in that house and say, you know what, let me take a loan of that land and send that child to university. That child is successful in university and comes out and get a good job, and you pay off the mortgage and own the property free and without encumbrances. And you look at that property and say, hey, child, you're doing well in your profession. Let me borrow a loan off this and start a business with you. And you do that. The business is successful and pays off that debt. And then again, the land is free and unencumbered. You know how a business from it. That's generational wealth. That's how you do it. That's how they did it. That's how they don't want us to do it. So we won't see that change where land and land ownership is dealt with fairly. Mount Salem is a predominantly capture land community, and many other communities in Jamaica. Because
Let's take a pin on this capture land thing. Let's
Yeah.
take it.
Before you say anything, Mrs. Silver, can I say because where I'm from, my background and my generation is Barnet. Let me just finish. That's it. That's it. Okay, right? And
I
I'm
don't know.
gonna be
I lost something there.
questioning.
Go on. Yeah. Go on.
I mean, with Barnet View, Barnet over Barnet Street. I'm just saying my
Okay.
lineage is Barnet. And I have been asking certain very hard questions as to how this name is there and how it is that we have, because we have land in Salem. A lot of the lands where we are from is we sell them and all of these things. But there's a lot of question of what happened in the back end in the past. And I can't understand how our government allowed these things to happen to up to today these people have our lands, our land. Like it's ridiculous. And a lot of Jamaicans are not even aware of this, because I wasn't even aware that we didn't need to pay to go to beach because it's a part of the land and you're born on the land. So why would you need to pay to access your natural resource? Until I came into the Caribbean and I was told that only foreigners pay to go to the natural resources of the land. So I said, but in Jamaica, I have to pay. And then the question people see the UDC, maintenance and all of these things. And I keep saying, but these things were imposed when? And why haven't they been changed now? I'm just saying, is it that hard?
No, it is not. But we don't have any political party with the will to do it because we are not the ones that are getting them elected. The $30.5 million that they're allowed per candidate to collect as a party doesn't come from me. It doesn't come from you. Where does it come from? We don't have that kind of money. Understand? But transitioning from Barnett, I can't say much about that, to infrastructure that you spoke about. People are looking at the current infrastructure boom and saying that Jamaica is doing well. That's on paper. That's a fallacy. We borrow money from organizations like the China Development Bank. And that is why the UIC believes that it's fine to do business with anybody and any entity, any country, but it should not be to the detriment of Jamaicans.
Yeah.
Now, when we borrow money from the Chinese Development Bank for their Belt and Road Initiative, that money doesn't come to us. But on paper, it comes to us, then to the contractor who is Chinese, provided by the Chinese, for the Chinese, and then back to the development bank. So the only thing that moves are ones and zeros on paper, but we end up with a sovereign debt to pay. Okay?
And I just say you need to repeat that, sovereign debt, because people don't understand it. As a global health practitioner, I didn't understand it until I was taught it. And then I realized that we're really in.
I'm being schooled here. That's why I'm just keeping quiet, because you guys are just dropping some nuggets here. I'm just listening.
So we have to be careful of how we do businesses. Even the resorts that Montego Bay and other areas in Jamaica is famous for, when we hear about how many million stopover visitors that we have had, the only thing from those operations that touch our shores is the PAYE. Those companies, they register a company locally. That company has a parent company that operates overseas and therefore operate bank accounts overseas. So when you make a reservation at one of those resorts, that transaction takes place overseas, preferably in a tax shelter haven, okay, like the UK, and then they forward monies to settle their operational debt at a particular period during their operations. So let's say workers are paid fortnightly, their accountant get the allocation based on request fortnightly and go ahead and make those payments. PAYE, the crook. So the large slice of the pie, which is now the corporate tax, they don't incur any here because there is no corporate tax. And of course, there's also the sweetheart deal that give them licensing and other things, including concessionary rates and concessions to import things, etc., that they're using. And it's not just one party. So when I speak, I don't speak about one party. I speak about both colonial parties. This is how Jamaica is in such a state where only the corporate entities are benefiting from the resources of the country, and the general population is dirt poor. Okay? I know of instances where social programs go to houses. As a matter of fact, without putting family business in the street, a family member sought assistance from the state in a matter and was told that you have a section of your house that's made of concrete, so you're ineligible. Your bathroom is on the inside, so you're ineligible for benefit. Okay? That is how you're judged. They didn't see the hours that has to be worked, the long hours that has to be worked in a menial job that pays minimum wage, right? The amount of hours that that child that is in need of guidance has to spend with friends, neighbors, or relatives while you try to make that dollar to keep a hot meal on the table and to keep them in school. You follow? So our metrics of measuring progress is skewed, and not because of ignorance, but because of deceit.
Yeah. Mr. Wright, I think I commend you for being so brave and bold to speak on the matters that I, as a citizen of Jamaica, a resident of Mount Salem, I tell people I have to big that up, because the narrative that is sold about us as a people is so untrue, right? And people need to hear this information and people need to know the reality. But we have not, there has not been, as you said, because of who is empowered, even the education system limits the information that we get to really understand our history and why we are where we are today. And we then could recognize that the progress that we are, the prosperity that we are having, the what do you call, the invisible prosperity that we're having is not really true. And we
So,
have to
so,
know, pay attention to that.
so Olivia, what do you see as a possible solution? One of the things I keep saying all the while when we talk about like the crime factor, which has been happening over the years, and we can in Jamaica, there's a saying, "We all know what going. We all know." It's like a video which came out of an alleged MP hitting a particular person. Everybody in Jamaica said, we know it go," but we still have to say the word allege, 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 But we all know, and it's like in Jamaica with crime and everything like that. Everybody said, "We all know it's linked." Do you think there's a need for something like a truth and reconciliation commission, something that deep down, deep to unearth? My carpet is flat, but under some carpet it is bulky. Things underneath it that needs to be unearthed. Do you think there's a need for that?
Well,
I put it all
yes,
again and Winston after
I'm
that.
I'm not just a commission, but I think there has to be a fall of the mantle. There needs to be a changing of the guards. If we really want to see the uprooting of certain stuff so we can replant and get proper fruits, right? And what does that look like? I would say that that is where we need independent voices. We need a revolution. I always tell people like we need to start a fire on the plantation again because we are oppressed. And I don't think it is fair for us to sit and pretend all dignified and we're having discourse at the table and we're saying, yes, it's going to happen. And then behind our backs, nothing is happening. So you talk about the 200% increase that government got. We talk about where are their job description and their role requirements. Do all the MPs fit this? Then we talk about these are the things like things are being said, they're not being done. We need to just get rid of it and let's actually take some serious radical action.
What is this radical action you're talking about?
I caution you. I caution you, Mrs. Charleville. I caution you.
Olivia, what is radical action? All right. Okay, Winston, go ahead.
Well, I will speak from my area of expertise when I talk about violence and violence reduction. And I think, as Mr. Wright, I didn't know that these were some of the pointers that he would talk about. But there has to be a lot of stripping away of the colonial laws and frameworks that we operate with, right? There has to be a different kind of policing structure. There has to be a different kind of civic education. There has to be a lot of um, sharing identity, like a reformation of our identity as a people, so we recognize who actually holds the power, i.e., I and I, right? So it's important that we go deep and not afraid to go deep and go and do that dirt work, which is the decolonial. We have to be stripped, and people don't want to be stripped because we're comfortable, but we have to unlayer the things that will burn our eyes, like when you're peeling an onion, and then go ahead and start over this process. I'm not saying it's gonna be like, okay, we're gonna shut down everything every day, but let's, for instance, we're talking about supporting survivors of gender-based violence. Violence is a prevalent atrocity in our country. It is not supposed, it doesn't need to take the incident of a young girl or what happened with the nurse for the government to say that they're going to revisit this. It should have been dealt with a long time ago.
Yeah.
It has been on the tables. Why is it not prioritized? But we are prioritizing all of our international relation engagement and how we look in the global sphere, and we're not prioritizing the heart of our people and the things that truly matters to them.
Winston, will UIC be that type of government and I've got to speak it like this, because if I'm going to speak to the PNP, I'm going to speak to them as if the government in waiting. I'm going to speak to the JLP. I'm going to speak to them as if they're the government in waiting to continue. If I'm going to speak to the UIC, I'm going to speak to the UIC as a government in waiting, and also being a kingmaker, if anything. Will the UIC be the type of that mentality that will go in and want to change things for the better, but not focusing on trying to just win the next election?
Listen, that's a question that you don't even have to ask. The UIC is not about power. It's not a power
Yeah.
grab for us. We're all 9 to 5ers looking for a change. I'm in this thing because I want to see better for my kids. I have 3 of them. I want to see better for my nephew, my nieces, and some of them have kids already. I want to see better for my 5 nephews that live in the UK who want so much to be here in Jamaica, right? So I am here for change. It's not a power grab. So the UIC wants to make that change. And that is why people don't want us to be aggrandized, because they don't want us to be popular. They don't want us to have recognition, because they know that we are serious about the change that we have preached. Our manifesto doesn't change from election to election. It's a solemn pledge to the people of Jamaica.
Yes.
That is why our manifesto has been the same since 2019 to now. A vote for the United Independence Congress to make us the government of the day does several things. It affirms that you want us to create, one, a true republic, one that protects your right to life, liberty, and property equally. So everybody is the same under law. From there, we will create what is known as a non-partisan constitutional republic. One with a constitution that tells the government what it can do and what it cannot do. So there you go. Your rights are enshrined. Who would want the people to have the reins of power? Only the UIC, and that is why we pledge to do this. So, for example, we will eliminate all tax, property tax, all other tax. You'll only have 2 taxes. One tax on income at all sources, one GCT. Both taxes are 10%, capped in law. Any government that wants to change that at any point during the fiscal year cannot simply go to Parliament and change that. They have to change the constitution. So a government that wants more taxes has to increase your output.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Winston. Thanks for that. Earlier I mentioned that I have another guest who's to come on, Miss Jacqueline Brown, president of the social workers in the UK, and to talk about the gender violence bit, and to her perspective on the bigger picture. I like to use the bigger picture. I'm going to bring in Jacqueline Brown. You stay there, Winston, and Olivier. Olivier, this is interesting for you as well. Let me bring in Jacqueline. Jacqueline, how are you doing?
Tired. As I said, I was laboring at work up until 7 o'clock yesterday for Labor Day, so I'm not as young as I used to be.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we won't keep it too long, as we're in the middle of something. But the whole issue regarding gender violence and the bit of what happened in recent days. My question to you when I approached you was the bigger picture. What is the bigger picture? We tend to move a lot with reaction. Something happened with that little girl. The police caught the guy. He's been unalive. That's a word because I'm using it on TikTok. And it's like that has been kicked off the front page. Perception. And now we have the other lady being beaten up by the guy, and he's in prison, incarcerated while the trial is getting ready to. But now Maria Dean, the issue regarding the other cops which has been caught, things seem to be pushing things away each time. But let me hear what you say, Jacqueline. How do we keep them focused and keep the momentum going with these things?
All right. I always like to start with history.
Yes.
And their values, and the fact that we are, and people, when I speak of this, people say, foolishness. 400 years of slavery is still imprinted, just like you have imprinted certain things in a computer. Unless you factory reset a phone, because I tell my students a phone is a computer. Unless you factory reset it, you're still going to have certain information there. That was what was used that has been used in certain cases. and that comes before the court. And as I shared with you, we have not addressed that issue, and we brushed it aside and we pushed away to say that we are shaped, our country, not only Jamaica but the Caribbean, is shaped by violence.
Yes.
And it's meted out to us, and it is seen as something that is normal, that is part and parcel. We have had the Ministry of Education talking about corporal punishment to stop, but then persons get upset because why, how are we going to control the students when they misbehave? How are you're coming into parents' business about how they discipline, and I've had to listen to my colleagues, social workers, guidance counselor, talk about a child coming into school that was beaten with a hose,
Yes.
beaten with machete. You throw rocks at them. That's the foundation that we're setting. So when it is that you have a man kicking a woman, and he had got a gun in his possession, right? It is I somebody looked at me with, when I said I want to sit down with that man and find out where his headspace is.
Yes.
I want to find out where his headspace is. What was the foundation that he had that allowed him to get to this point? And are we're not we're not addressing the fact that we feed our children from their babes with beatings, with verbal abuse, with physical abuse, with emotional abuse, and it's accepted. It is accepted, and it's only when it breaks and the explosion happens that there's a hue and cry, because we need to start from pregnancy, and with both parties, male and female. We need to start very early to start addressing our emotional traumas. What are our emotional traumas and baggages that we have been carrying that allows us to think this is okay? That allows us to think it's okay to treat our children a certain kind of way, and then they grow into adults with certain kind of behavior. That's the foundation that we're dealing with. And we have children who are coming into school, into our education system from very early.
Yes.
And that needs to be assessed to find out what are the traumas that you're experiencing, what are some of the challenges that you're exposed to, and start reprogramming and transforming our people, all of us, because all of us have experienced trauma. And have we dealt with it? No. When you talk about counseling, persons, one, they don't have the money to pay for it. It's in Jamaica, in the UK, your insurance will cover counseling. That's not happening in Jamaica. That does not happen in Jamaica. You talk about health.
You get a referral, and then that is taken care of through the NHS, if anything like
exactly.
That.
But that is not the case in Jamaica. That is not included. And I, as a social work association, we want to lobby for the fact that persons who have challenges and trauma, that health insurance covers them going to see a therapist. And it's paid for, because persons, a lot of us, even those of us on a teacher salary like myself and a social worker salary like myself, if it wasn't for that, we could not be able to pay for certain medical in Jamaica. So why are we not included therapy on the list that can be paid for by insurance?
Yes, yes,
This
yes.
is what we need. We need to. I have a phrase that I use. We need to peel the onion, and when you peel the onion, you cry.
You said that, Olivia. Did you say that? I
Oh
think
my
I
God!
just
I
said
was
it.
not.
I
I
just
was
said it.
not.
I just said it.
I was not.
I just said it.
I
We are
said it.
team spirits because I just said that.
We need to peel the onion. And when you peel the onion, all the pain from peeling it, the tears are going to flow, and you transform.
Yeah.
And we have a thing where we talk about boys are not supposed to be cry. And I had to speak to a colleague recently about a boy not behaving like a boy. I said, when you cut somebody, it bleeds, and whether it's a male or a female. So why is it not allowed that a male child is not supposed to be crying when they
Yeah.
feel pain? What
Can I stop you
happened?
right there? Can I stop you
Yeah.
there, Jacqueline? I'm
Yes.
going to let Winston go. Winston, before you go, why are men not supposed to cry? Why are you not supposed to cry?
Again, it all is part of the colonial mindset, the post-slavery trauma that we're carrying from slavery. Now, when we were being victimized, it's usually the male, especially the strong ones, so that way they don't lead a rebellion. And I can go also in very graphic details into the various breaking techniques that were used here and throughout the Caribbean for that to call our quote unquote rebellious nature. Now, when you're being victimized, if you cried, if you showed weakness, if you showed that you broke, you lost your following one, and Bakramasa winning two. So you are no longer the leader. And most of us
Yeah.
came together not because of language or our tribe or culture, but because of a common struggle. So we didn't speak the same language, but we understood
Yeah.
what a fight was. So if you cried, then you weren't seen as a strong one. They looked at the next strong one to lead them.
Yes, yes.
So that's what we're trying to hold on to. And
And you're right about that, because as men, sometimes we always, growing up from that era there in Jamaica, you're a boy, you're a man. No, you're not a boy, you're a man. Come on, man, man up, man up.
a man
That's what the
blow,
first
Yes.
term,
a
man
man
Yes.
up.
blow.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
That's
you're a
right.
Yes.
man, you know what I mean? Business man, you're a man, you know what I mean? And I believe that is something which is it has been detrimental, where lots of men keep things suppressed inside of
Suppressed.
them, and then when they blow, because there's
Yeah.
so much things that need to come out. But while Jacqueline is gonna come back, she just went back. Winston, you need to go. So any last word, Winston, before you go, because you say you have to dash, and then Jacqueline will come back shortly. Yeah.
Definitely. Just to share a few last words on United Independence Congress, we're a small movement and we have not
Mm.
had the legacy of 80 years, but we also do not have the negativity of 80 years of mismanagement and abuse that we learned from
Mm.
the colonial masters. Now, while
Yes.
we're a small movement, you are correct that we're positioning ourselves to be the kingmaker. While
Yes.
officially in our representational act, there is an official designation for a coalition government. It is still possible by virtue of how broken our electoral system is. Because remember, you don't elect your prime minister directly,
Yes. That's what
right?
people sometimes need to
You
understand as well. Yeah.
correct. So you elect MPs and send them to parliament, and they choose a prime minister for you. A system
Yes.
like that allows the UIC to, as you say, play kingmaker. And anyone listening with a discerning ear, anyone that wants change knows that the UIC does not need to have 63 candidates to be able to help change Jamaica. But the change that we want to make requires us to have the majority of 63 candidates, and we're pushing for that. But for now, we need to stop the hemorrhaging. We need to end the political and social decadence by
Yes.
injecting objective leadership into the system. One that will say, hold on, let's
Yeah.
look at this another way.
Mm. All right. Well, listen, Winston Wright, I want to thank you so much for joining tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, for those on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, Mr. Winston Wright is member of the United Independent Congress. Have you heard about the Jacqueline Bryan? Have you heard about the UIC, the Independent Congress?
I have.
Mm.
I think it was something that you have done before that
Yes,
you
with
brought
Joseph.
to my
Yes,
knowledge.
yeah,
Yes.
Joseph on, yeah, spokesperson on justice, national security, and defense, and a
Mhm.
well said representation, Winston. Thank you so much for that. And I will. as of tonight, people are going to say I'm from UIC. When I interviewed Marlon Morgan, I was JLP. When I interviewed Mark Golden, I was PNP. So for tonight, they're going to say I'm UIC because that's how Jamaica is. I believe very much that you need to be able to speak and communicate with all different persons, because I believe at the end of the day, as someone said, when you cut, we all run the same blood.
Blood.
And we
Yeah.
all want the same thing, best for Jamaica. Am I right or am I
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You're absolutely correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Silbert, for having me on. And again, just
Yes, sir.
reminding your viewers that we're at uicjamaica.com. We're
Yes.
also active on social media at UIC Jamaica. And you
Yes.
can reach out. Our numbers are there. So
Yes.
please reach out to us. We'll be
Yeah,
happy.
so somebody just asked a question, what does UIC stand for again? And I said to him, watch the show. It is running across there. United Independent Congress.
Yes, Jamaica's third registered political party. And of course, I throw the gauntlet out to Mrs. Lovell. Look forward to hearing from you. As will be able to share my contacts, and we'll take it from there. And as the one-time vice president for Cornwall, and sometimes I act in the role still, it is my duty to help procure worthy and noble candidates for the movement. But even if you choose not to go the route of representation, I'm sure there are things that you can help us get done. But thank you for having me on, Kilburn. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion.
My regards.
And thank you. It's lovely meeting you, Mr. Wright.
Lovely
Blessings.
meeting you as
Meeting
well.
you too, Mr. Wright.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
sir.
evening, all.
Much appreciated. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye, and the party. Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Silverman, is it possible I could just make a comment based on what Miss Brian was sharing
No, you can't make
regarding the trauma?
You can't make any comment. I'm not kidding. You can.
And you know, Mr. Wright was stating that we are not aware as to the history of that legacy of slavery and colonialism on the people and what would happen to the men if they cry. But one of the information I found when I did my research was I think it was Professor Hickling from Uic. He spoke about decolonizing mental health. And a lot of times we talk about therapy and trauma, and then we recognize that there's a resistance. But we can't necessarily force the resistance to say, no, man, you need to just do it. When we, as you said, we have to go back to the root. And that is from colonization, because anybody who disagreed with Massa was sent to the mental house because you must be mad. How dare you go against what we're telling you? And so we have that stigma engraved in us from colonialism that when you say go and talk to somebody, my granny will say, but me no mad. You understand? Not recognizing that they need this safe space in order to peel away the things that are hurting them or affecting them. So there has to be a lot of cultural reformation that we do to get to the place of acceptance of what trauma or trauma therapy could look like. And I'm a strong advocate for culturally appropriate therapy because the reality is not everybody wants to talk to a stranger. And we are a very religious nation as well. So how do we promote the things that are culturally appropriate for us as trauma therapy? Where we can meet people on the corner, we can flex and we can, we have the beach lines and we do these things and we talk, we create safe spaces. When we promote in the corporate spaces where we could go in and have corporate events where people are able to heal, healing circles, how we get the church involved or the different religions involved in offering this and not so much on the because I know the insurance is one thing, but when you think about insurance, it's all about making money. So why, if you're thinking about a nation where have such a horrible, everybody needs help, can't pay for it. They won't be wanting to pay for it. Everybody going to want it because when you realize, like I was saying to Mr. Silver recently, that it's very hard for a typical Jamaican to say, I go to have a mental health day because who is going to feed the kids? You understand? There's so much intersectionality when it comes on to mental health of Black Jamaicans. And I want to specify Black Jamaicans because not every Jamaican went through slavery, right? A lot of them are descendants of colonizers. So they have a lot of benefit that we don't have. So
let me interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
You see, when we talk about, I remember doing the research about crime and our children, and it was the perpetrator and the victim. And
Mm-hmm.
even if some of our colonizers, there is a trauma that you experience as a colonizer,
Mm-hmm.
that that guilt, that burden, wanting to have to deal with that and address that. So both
Yeah.
sides, as although I don't want to mention it right now because I'm very upset with South Africa at the moment. But the truth and reconciliation, that Nelson Mandela introduced when he became president.
With Tutu,
It's
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that it's both sides.
Yeah. We
Both
can talk
sides
about
need
Rwanda as well. Both sides.
exactly, both
Yeah.
sides need to meet and
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that we did this, I
And
received
yeah, we treat
this,
it.
and how do we move forward, right? And Silburn
But I
was
don't think.
asking me,
Go ahead.
1 second, Olivia. Sorry, Jacqueline. Yeah, yeah,
Silburn was asking me earlier about um what happened. I said, well, the media sent at the sensational point of it. That's when you see it come up with the abuse, physical or emotional. But there are
yes.
persons who are working in the trenches, who are continuing the work. Women's Media Watch is one of them who's always out there pushing for gender issues. The gender there's well, it's no longer men's desk. Bureau of Gender, Entertainment and Sports. I have been partnering with them from COVID, where they
Yes.
have been working with our young men in schools, and getting them to acknowledge that what is being pushed at you, to say this is how a man is supposed to behave. Um, Having them meet other men who don't behave like that, who don't think like that. So those work is happening. The
Yeah.
work is happening, but here what happened? It's not in the media.
It's not in the
It
media.
only comes in the media when a situation happened, like the man who abused the woman, or when we all right, how many persons know that the Jamaica Constabulary Force have a domestic violence unit that you can go in, and that has been because calls have happened from social workers, from Women's Media Watch, from Gender, talking about the fact there was a time when, if you listen very carefully, it's not happening, we're not hearing about it so much, a time when spousal, they would kill the spouse and then kill themselves.
Mm.
And that came about because of that. We need to address it. We need to deal with it. So the Jamaica Constabulary Force has a unit that is dealing with domestic violence, and it's not just as a slighter hearing about, okay, let's meet. Let's see what we can do. Let's
Yes.
I talk with my hands all the time.
Yeah.
So
Mediation. Yeah, yeah,
let's
yeah.
see what we can do. So those things are happening, but it's not sensational.
Yeah.
It's
But
not sensational. So you're
it
not
is
going
very.
to hear it.
Mm.
I think it's
Sorry,
not what it's not so much. It's not that not only is not sensational because it's not so much newsworthy again because you know what sells the paper is what needs to be printed, but also because it's not a priority of the government because the budgetary alignment or allocation to these services because I run an NGO, Women of Destiny, and we support survivors based in Montego Bay and we do a bit of work across the board. But there is no unless the organization has been created from the time when Parliament was when we were being independent. When I look at the history of most of these organizations that get funding from the government for sustenance, it would have been from the earlys in the 90s. But the new organization, I can give you a list of organizations doing the groundwork, the grunt work, as you would say. But
Yes.
the funding that is required for us to be sustained, we have to now depend on external funders, which again,
Mhm.
their priorities may not be aligned with our priorities.
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
again, so these are some of the things where we think about government and what they need to do in order to help because we are doing the groundwork and we know that the change is the small changes that will make that big impact. right? And if
Yes.
these things were properly funded, the Bureau of Gender Affairs, we have worked with them as well, and they'll tell you they don't have the money, they don't have the money, they don't have the money. It's tight, it's tight, it's tight.
Yes.
Everything take
Yes.
long to get paid. People, you
Oh.
understand? I've worked in the US as a victim advocate, and how system like the federal is funded for certain things, and then you have the state fund for certain things, and it is so
Oh, and
it's
that's all
and there's a
changing. That's
correlation,
all
and
changing
there's a
right now.
movement.
That's all
I came back
changing
home
right
and I'm
now.
saying, where are we as a collective where we work together, we move together as an ecosystem to help and support our people? But it's fragmented. That's one. And also, we don't get as I was sharing with Mr. Silver earlier, it's not on the priority list of the government. It's not on the priority list of the government. So there's
And,
no
and,
money
and,
that
and,
comes
and
to us
when
to
it's
do the work.
sensationalized, that's when they jump and say they're going to do this. And then
Yes.
at the end of the time, when you approach them and try to get to meet with them to say, okay, fine, you made a commitment for A, you made a commitment for A, and here we are. Let's meet on the table and sit down and have a conversation and see how we can work together to get this to happen. They're forever busy. They're not
Mhm.
available. You
Yep.
can't get to them.
Yeah.
So can I ask? So can I ask then, Jacqueline? As you mentioned about the police bit, I just sort of stuck on that bit there about the domestic violence area. Uh, and you mentioned that we don't know, and you're right about that. I didn't know about that. I'm sure that lots of people don't know. How then can people? Okay. How does it work? It only works when people go to them and there's an issue, like they call police and it's a DV issue, then they come in, or what?
All right.
Is it a referral process or what?
What happens is that
Yeah.
persons will call the police because there is a disturbance,
Yes.
or and the persons the police would then go in, and when the police go in and discover that it is domestic, it's a couple issue, and so then they're then referred
Yes.
to the domestic violence intervention centers. And I learned about this when JMMB had a elevator conference a couple of years
Yes.
ago. I learned about this again. As social workers, we were not informed. We did not know anything about it. And it was when we met at this conference, and there was representatives from the Jamaica Constabulary Force and representatives from different areas were there. That is when we learned of it. And I said, okay, whoa, let's have a conversation. Let's let our social workers be aware. So the left hand don't know what the right hand do.
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
That's what I'm
So
saying.
and it and that made it. And we have met
Yes.
together and had conversations, and we're trying to bridge the gap. And there are certain things where we're in dialogue, and we say, okay, fine, what about this? What about that? How do we approach it? How do we go about this? And again, it's like pulling teeth and nails to get certain things to happen. If you
I
don't,
could just
just what don't have the money to do certain things. Just like
I
the women of destiny don't have the
yeah,
money.
we don't have the money, and I knew about that unit because of it was done through UN Women Spotlight Initiative.
Right.
And it was done a bit, they had to hurry and finish everything because the timeline was done, and that was one of the big initiatives that they executed. But again, the public awareness is so minimal, it is not prioritized, and that's why I keep saying, if we have this erosion of our human capital, why is it that the government is not prioritizing the welfare of our people? I'm talking about human rights. We have these are human dignity that should be at the forefront when you think about running a country, because you can't run a country without people,
But you
and
see,
these things are not shared.
from ever since when we tied ourselves to IMF, and a lot of our social services had to be taken out of the equation because GDP had to be a certain things, and certain social intervention that were coming from out of the government was not encouraged.
And again, we're coming from a post-colonial society with colonial frameworks as to how we're supposed to build and develop, not recognizing the fact that we start at the back of the race with everybody far ahead, but we're given the same standards, and we don't think something is wrong with that.
Yes.
My principal says all the time that Usain Bolt is or in a situation with our students are in the parking lots, while
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Usain Bolt is already in the blocks.
Yep.
And that's something that has stuck with me. Her
Yes.
saying that, and it makes my head itch, and I understand clearly that how can you have their two children,
Mm.
one of them is in a situation where there's no running water, there's no electricity, right? The home that they reside in is made up of zinc,
Mm.
don't even have a proper roof. And
Mm.
then you have another child who has running water, electricity, a proper room, even separate bedroom. What's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
The person with all of that kind of resources is going to get ahead,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
is going to
Yep.
get ahead. And when we again, when we talk about repatriation, and when we talk about, you gave us independence, and people curse about independence.
Yeah.
You gave us independence, but yet still, you still had the chain on our ankle, weighing
Run on,
us
man.
down, weighing us down
Mm.
in terms of we can't do this because we've been
And
given land that is not fertile, that can do
mm-hmm.
nothing. And then we have the chain around our heads that has kept us in a certain kind of mindset
Yeah.
about what is accepted as
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
norm. What is it you're allowed to do? And you're
Mm.
very hesitant to say certain things because here what happened. Bakramasa got cut off the funding. Bakramasa got do this. Bakramasa
Mm-hmm.
got do that.
People are
And
suppressed. Mm.
Bakramasa has changed.
Yeah.
AMF to
Yeah.
me is Bakramasa.
Mm-hmm.
AMF to me is Bakramasa because we had to sell a lot of the things that we owned as Jamaicans to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any say in how it is
Yes.
managed, how it is run, and what it is did. So certain things have been wiped off
Mm-hmm.
our books and say
Yep.
we cannot do this.
Yep.
How can we? We're hurting, we're bleeding, we still have the chain in our ankles, we still have the chain in our head, and we have not been allowed to use certain things to
Yep.
remove those chains.
And a
Yeah.
point which was mentioned earlier, people are living on lands, and now it's called capture land. So therefore, they don't feel a sense of even ownership.
Ownership. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
therefore, one is actually not at home in your home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had an interesting conversation with somebody about that yesterday.
Mm.
Ah,
So Jacqueline, then before we wrap up, we have always have these conversations and we try to find solutions as much as possible. That's what we're about. What do you see as the solution in a way? Because it cannot be done tomorrow. It's got to be a process. You know, how will this process be effected?
well, I know that the JCF did a cross country tour across certain parishes in Jamaica to inform persons about the domestic violence unit in
Yeah.
February. So that needs to continue to make people aware of that there is a domestic violence intervention unit in the Jamaica Constabulary Force. That's a two-edged sword because some persons don't necessarily trust
As a matter of
those.
fact, Oliver, remind me so we can try to find links with that group, if anything, and Jacqueline, so we can even have an interview with them to talk about it as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
so people
please. Yeah.
can be made aware of that.
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
The Bureau of Gender Affairs has safe spaces for women who are being abused.
Right.
We now need to have safe spaces for men to speak about, because
Yes.
one of the things, I was on an hotline some years ago, and some male used to call the hotline and speak, The hotline does not exist anymore, and we need to have something like that. We have a hotline for children,
Yes.
211, but there was a hotline I was a part of that existed.
Is that
That
like the Samaritans? That is a bit like the Samaritans, which they have overseas here. The
yeah,
Samaritan, where people can call in whenever they have issues. Yes.
right. So
Confidentiality.
putting something like that, putting it back in place again.
Mm.
Funding was from outside. They tried to sustain it after the funding was up, but it could not be sustained. And
Yes.
you had persons calling in at that line, men calling in and
Mm.
pouring their hearts out because you couldn't see them, they
Mm.
couldn't see you, and this was a safe space for men to speak about the issues that were hurting them and that they were not
Mm.
sure how to navigate. We need something
Mm.
like that to happen.
Yes.
All right, a hotline that men and women, but
Yes.
mostly our men, because we are focusing on our women. We're finding safe spaces for our women, but there needs to be safe spaces for our men. Our men to
Yes.
vent, our men to know how to navigate certain things. Because I had a conversation, I keep having these conversations because men, maybe because I don't know what it is, and I have brothers, and I'm always talking about men. And when I sit down and talk to my brothers, and they share certain conversation, and they say that, I'm saying, but how many of our men in Jamaica have? Because myself and my sister, we would have these conversations as a family,
Mm.
and they would listen to us as women about how to navigate this and how to go about this. And it also happens for our nephews. But
Yes.
how many men has that opportunity for safe space to learn how to navigate certain things? Because men have become very afraid of women. And
Mm.
because they're afraid and they don't know how to verbalize, that's when they get physical.
Mm.
That's when they get physical. Because men do not know how to manage the conversation. They don't know how to manage the emotions. So let's provide a safe space for men to manage the emotions and the conversations so that we
And
can then
yeah.
not lead to that explosion of
Yes.
hurting women, of
But
hurting their girls.
yes, Jacqueline. Also, in light of where we are today in this life now, and we have boys growing up, is it the parents now should also be educated as to how to
Yes, yes,
train their boys
yes,
up
yes,
now?
yes, yes,
'Cause
yes.
years ago, we weren't supposed to go in the kitchen. You know what I'm trying to say? As well, you know what I mean? But trust me, my wife can tell you I cook and I wash up, you know what I mean? I have no problem with that now, you know what I'm saying? But years ago, I can't recall going in the kitchen and cooking or anything like that. Father would, boy, you know,
But
wash the
again, that's
car.
the colonizing.
Yeah.
That gender role of what a man is supposed to do and what a woman is supposed to do. That's changing because
Mm.
I was, if it is that you have a wife or a partner who has given birth and she has a C-section, she
Mm.
can't come out of the bed. What's going to happen? She can't not going to be able to cook. She's not
Mm.
going to be able to do any household chores,
Mm.
right? And even without a C-section, haven't gone to labor for so many hours, and she comes home and the place is in a mess because you don't know how to do something,
Mm.
right? And we need to teach our boys. Look here, nobody in growing up in my household at my age, nobody in our family, male, everybody, you had to know how to cook. You had
Mm.
to know how to clean. You had to know how to wash. And those
Mm.
time I hand wash and pin the clothes them on the line. And
The
my
scruff,
grandmother,
the scruff,
yes,
scruff.
them script. Look here, my grandmother, the word, look here, Mama tell the people, say punishment worse than beating. Because my grandmother inspect the clothes, and I remember I put white clothes on line, and a couple of them did still have some spots on it. Now you know when you, them time in a washing machine and the water and the ground muddy.
Uh,
And she just take off her clothespin. Her clothespin go up on dirty clothes. She just take off the clothespin them off of the line and it drops in on the ground with the mud. Because remember, I said the water dripping out.
Yeah.
But take that up and start all over. The kind of punishment my grandmother used to give. Because she old, she can't hold for beat way. So she just know how to do certain things. I mean, to get, and something has stuck in my head. And everybody in that household, there was more males than there was female, and everybody had to pull their weight. Everybody had to pull their weight. So that whole thing of speaking to our males,
Yes.
having that space where our males are comfortable.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that, Jacqueline, and we're gonna follow up on that. And last word from you, Olivia. I mean, you're not
You
the only
know,
one that cooking. You're not the only one that cooking. You know,
no. And we call it. I'm married to a Tobagonian, so they're the culture, and you say it's a colonizer trait about the gender roles, but it's really a very African culture,
yeah,
very rooted African culture, and you'd question who comes home then and cook and stuff. And I have a friend from Nigeria who tell you my mother would come. Like I can't do it. I can't cook Olivia, so my mother would have to come, right?
yes,
So they have found ways around that to ensure that the men stay away. But one of the things my organization is actually coming up on 10 years now of operation, and we are now integrating because I'm married and because I have two boys. We are
Yes.
now at a place of it's starting. We are rebranding, and it's now men and women of destiny, and we're gonna do a big launch about that in August. But it's I recognize that we have been creating the safe space for women, and we have let men out of the picture. And just like you always had the question as to what goes into the mind of the perpetrator, and if we don't get to the root of that, we can't make any change. And I
No, we
think a
can't.
lot of the solutions that because we're so social minded, the higher powers that be don't really like that because the metrics that measures the social change is not quantifiable. And they need
Very
to see
true.
the numbers to feel justified in the action. But we know that the work that we're doing now, we may not live to see the ultimate change, but the
yes.
generation to come will have a totally different experience if we would continue to inject and pour our resources into the space that matters. And that is our human um, capital, the human dignity of our
So
people.
that yeah, so definitely
We
there's
have
a
to
need.
find a way because
Yes,
since they want it to be measured, we have to find a way to get the data.
Yeah.
yes,
Like the data to say, okay, fine, this person came in with
mm,
A, and this is what has happened in a year's time. This is what,
yes,
and it takes, you see, that's the problem. It takes a long time. It's not
That
and
is
like
it,
what they
medicine.
that.
It's not like medicine where when you get the injection, you start to see a result.
so
No, it's
it's
dealing
it's
with
it's
reprogramming
a
and
will.
transformation.
So it is a willpower and the resolve and the tenacity to see these
The
things through,
endurance. The
Yeah.
and the
endurance is not
endurance
a
and the
sprint.
endurance.
This is a marathon.
It's a
Yep.
marathon.
Yes, it's
Right.
a
Yes.
marathon.
Well,
Yes, it
well, definitely.
is.
Well, listen, guys, I want to thank you so much for coming. And something you mentioned, I just want to say is that when we had a spate of knife crimes in the UK, and that has gone down, I always used to say the focus was so much on the victim, the victim, the victim. And I've
Yes.
always said, I'd love to be able to understand the mindset of the perpetrator.
Yeah.
I'd love to understand the house, the family. Did they see something? Did they pick up on something? Did they ignore it? And I always say, I believe that something is missing there, whereby it wasn't mapped, it wasn't tracked, but you always know about the victim. The
Yeah.
victim, the victim, the victim, the mothers, the crying and everything. But the perpetrator, they go to prison
Because
and
even
that's
with
it.
that case with that young man and the mother and I'm saying, and I remember her, he was
The
the
Maria Dean,
father,
Maria Dean.
not Maria Dean,
Oh,
the one that was killed from the young lady, the grade
oh,
9 year old. And
okay, yeah,
that my first thought was, okay, the mother didn't, the father took, he was given custody of the child. What was the mindset of the father? You know, and so on, and what is poured into him every day.
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for coming on tonight at so short notice. President of the Jamaica Association of Social Workers, and my good friend Olivia Shaw Lovell from Trinidad and Tobago, well, originally from Jamaica, straight out of Montego Bay. Executive Director of Women. She's we're gonna have a show with her and her husband one day because there's a massive story there of living in faith, living by faith. And she's all over the place. Next day she's in the UK, next day she's there, next day, but she's now in Trinidad.
She's in Trinidad now. Okay.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
We need to talk. We need to talk.
All right.
And
Okay.
I
Okay.
know Silburn will link us.
I'll give you the link. And
I've seen Silburn has made some wonderful links for me, and we've worked
Fantastic.
together with some persons
Fantastic.
from ARM. Had a presentation
Okay.
from ARM this week.
Okay,
And
okay.
there.
Chantal and those guys.
Man, and that came out of you.
Yes.
Yes,
Definitely.
we being together on this space.
Yes, definitely. We're going to create this space. And that's why I like this, because there's connection and everything like that. And Olivia, for argument's sake, was always somebody commenting in the comment box. And I said, this person's always thought, let me reach out to her, you know. and there we are, you know, bringing people in closer as much as possible. Well, anyway, I'll link you with Olivia and Jacqueline. I'll share you guys' contact details. And
thank you.
So take care of yourself tonight. Olivia, take care of yourself and sort out the boys. I laughed one time. I was on a show with her and the kids were all, and I was dying with laughing. I said, boy, I was just enjoying watching them giving her. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Jacqueline.
Blessings.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, both of you. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining tonight, and for those on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube, the pleasure was mine, and the discussion was really good. Talking with the gentleman from UIC, Mr. Winston Wright, Winston Wright, and talking about can the UIC make a difference, just like how Nigel Farage in the UK has made a difference as being a kingmaker at this present moment. Could be the possibility of in the government, subject to how things are. And touch base on the fact that UIC, third political party, I understand there's a fourth registered political party. And I think it is very important to have these discussions, these conversations with different groups. Of course, as I said all the while, bringing on a UIC person, people say I'm a UIC. Bringing on someone from the JLP, people say I'm JLP. Bringing on someone from the PNP, people say I'm PNP. But I guess what, I'm all of them. Just like when I'm with the civil society groups, National Integrity Alliance, Jamaican for Justice, Advocates Network, I'm part of all of these different organizations because I believe in connecting them. And just like how Miss Jacqueline Bryan said, I connected some different groups together. I believe in connecting, being that nucleus that pull people together so they can build. And of course, definitely do not want the issue of gender violence, do not want the issue of the nurse who was being battered, do not want the issue of the little girl who was killed, 9-year-old girl. Unalive is the right word to say because of TikTok factor. That they need to be the sex offenders register. I don't believe it should be made public, but that shouldn't wait for something sensational to happen. Shouldn't wait for something bad to happen to generate actions. It shouldn't be reactionary. It should be very proactive as much as possible. So, ladies, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Silburn Citadel. Thank you very much. Remember to like and subscribe and tell everyone about the show. And remember to follow me. And of course, check out my walk and talk in the park. It's awesome. And check out these shows which I'm doing now. Who are they? I have this thing called Who Are They? Who are the people in the park? And I'm starting to do some one-on-one discussion with them. And of course with the dogs, of course with the birds as well. Okay? God bless you. Bye bye.